Hello YouTube! What we are up here today at the shop doing is going to show you the 350Z rental car fleet that we're building for drift weeks in the future and this drift week. This kind of made sense because we were local. We didn't have to ship the cars all over the country to get them to the start, which is going to be a really big Achilles heel of this plan in the future. But basically what it boils down to is we have a bunch of international drivers that want to do drift week, and it's very difficult for them to buy cars, find cars, pay for them, store them, transport them, and do everything from overseas when they have a different currency. When Facebook Marketplace people want somebody to come look at the car and give them cash, they just can't get over the finish line of actually buying the cars and getting them sorted and stored and everything else, especially when you factor in that every drift car that you buy online is going to require at least a day of testing and then at least a couple days of fixing parts and everything. And if you're an international person, that's going to cost hotel rooms, fuel, tires, extra days of traveling, food, everything else. It's going to be thousands of dollars to sort your car out. So the only way that this was really going to work for the international people, unless they buy their cars for multiple trips, which some of the guys like Luke Fink do and Wout, is if we have some rentals. Previously, Drift HQ was renting us some cars, but I figured I would jump into it because we're in Texas and I was helping out one friend in particular, Dion, and it kind of snowballed, and it worked better if we did a bunch of them, which is kind of crazy. So I'm going to show you now the rental cars, chat with you how we are doing them and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just want to make an episode about this, so let's get started. So what we have here is one of the drift cars. My plans originally were to buy completely sorted drift cars with everything from moved steering racks with big angle kits, seats, hydro handbrakes, suspension, cages, everything. That turned into kind of a disaster. The more drifty the car was, the more maintenance it needed, and also I guess the more the big angle kits and everything else just kind of ruined the cars a little bit for various reasons, and it wasn't necessary. So the first two cars we bought were super done up. The first one was actually caged with $4,500 coilovers, a remote reservoir, everything else. That was kind of a giant waste, and I'll explain all that in a bit. But here, let me show you the first car and I'll show you what we're doing. So I bought a sorted out drift car that's wide body, all ready, has a wing on it, has all the arms in the back. We can show you that in a bit. We added the wheels, by the way. Has an aftermarket hood, has an aftermarket bumper, has side skirts, but they're off so it can get on the lift, has shiny headlights, which look cool. Every one of these cars is an HR motor, so that means every one of these 350Zs is a 2007 to 2008, and there's 4 of them, by the way. And we wanted the engines as stock as possible because the 350Zs are pretty indestructible for drifting as long as you keep them really stock. And then we have a handbrake, a hydro one because the 350Zs have really poor cable brakes. We have a racing seat, we have a bracket and all that stuff to make that work, disconnectable steering wheel, and then we have to have some traction control defeat of some kind. And then coilovers. This one does have a radiator. And then each of the cars needs a bunch of maintenance. So we take them out to a test day, test the cars, try and break them, bring them back, fix them, and then we'll drive them around on the street for a little while to make sure everything works. This car, can we open the door, Mark? Yeah. All right. So this car, the problem was the window did not go up correctly and meet up here because this is a replacement door because the car is silver and the door was red, and they never really mated everything up correctly. So we bought extra doors. We now have 3 extra doors. Mark gutted one to get the regulator and everything else out, set that up so it goes up and down properly. And this is one of those little things we didn't really budget for and the price and everything of this program because we want the people to be comfortable. Next up, we have to adjust the seats to each driver to make all that work. That's not really a maintenance thing, that's just a setup thing. This one required a clutch and flywheel and pressure plate. I can put pictures up and show you, but basically what happened is this reluctor ring fell off of an exity twin disc clutch, and then the bolts chainsawed and the ring chainsawed its way through the engine block a bit. You can see shavings, or actually that's a dent, a nick. This whole thing was just making a crazy rattling noise, and it was physically impacting the crank angle position sensor. So we went through 2 of the crank angle position sensors on this car, immediately testing it. clutch, flywheel, pressure plate, door mechanism for all that stuff. So we had to buy 2 doors to get the parts we needed. And then we have to align the car. Everything was loose in the front of this car. This is an FDF kit with a moved rack. It was kind of a disaster. And then all the rear arms, or half of the rear arms, were loose. And we raised the car significantly so it doesn't immediately obliterate the kit. Let me show you the engine bay. Was this the messiest of the cars with the most problems?
So far, I haven't looked into the new one that's getting painted.
Yeah, so far this is the biggest mess.
I hate this so much. The evap system on this brown car is fucked up. So I'm going to go about that much fuel and I have to wait a sec. And then I can go again. Again. I'm also going to scan. Shows codes, view it. Tells you what code. Then you clear it.
And because of the way that the cars are when they're full drift cars, they're the ones that need the most attention and have, every time you add an aftermarket component to a car, it gives you the chance to screw something up. And this car had the most screwed up so far. The first one we did was a red one, and I'll show you an overlay right now. I ended up selling that one because someone needed it. That car like needs a cage cut out, needs a bunch of stuff on it. It's a good drift car, and it was supposed to be the most sorted, but it overheated, a fan broke, had to be bled, which knocked it down for part of the day. And I think that's the only thing that one really had a problem with on the test day. Let's pop the hood. You can see that this is a dual intake car, so that means it's a high rev motor, an HR. Is that what the HR means, high rev? I think so. That's right, because they have an up rev motor. It's in pretty good shape, has a bigger radiator here, and then I guess that's about it. This car probably makes about 280 wheel horsepower. I believe it has a tune on it. Now it has a new clutch and flywheel pressure plate and all that junk. And I feel like you've been working on this thing a lot. It drifts pretty well, but it was in limp mode a lot of the time. All right, so let's move on. Oh, I also got all these wheels to match. So we have multiple cars on these CR Lies so that the cars are we were gonna paint them all the same color to match and everything. And then I kind of gave up on that because it was taking too much time. This is not the red one I was talking about before. This is another one I bought. This is actually the best of the fleet right now. Dion is going in this one. This is a 2008 or 2007, I don't remember, but it's basically on BC Racing coilovers, completely stock engine bay, RPF ones, even though those are not mine, it came on them, which was kind of cool. And this one has the little tiny GK Tech rack adapter, or knuckle adapters, and I think this one drifts the best. I really like it, but it does not have a handbrake. So this one, and it's wide body for some reason with these huge rivet things, which is hilarious. Uh-oh, it's locked. Can't really show it to you if it's locked, but anyways, there's this one. This is the fastest of them as well. One of them had PPE long tubes, had like straight exhaust, had a tune, had a bunch of stuff on it. And the completely stock one is the fastest out of all of them, which is kind of funny. And when we were testing it, it was on brand new 275s and it drifted fine on 275s. Didn't really pull third gear super well, but it did third gear. And then second gear, it roasted them. I'll show you a video of it getting tested. No handbrake, doesn't have one. And then little silencer and an aftermarket exhaust. That car is by far like the cream puff of them. Drives super nice, nice interior, very good car. I'll probably like have that as a street car. We're gonna add one of the pull-up handbrakes, and then it already has a seat, a steering wheel. We're adding a dual caliper setup to that one. We're changing the clutch flywheel pressure plate on that one as well, because I want these things to be completely reliable for the trip. and I don't want anybody to have any problems. This is hilarious, having drift cars on actual clickers, because like S13s never came with that. All right, let's get inside this thing and show you around. So it's a little dirty right now, but it's full interior, which is super nice for a drift car. Makes the car, especially on drift week, kind of like a cream puff. You aren't like the other one in there. It's very loud inside, especially because I had some exhaust leaks because we had to do lots of little maintenance to it. This thing is great. This is funny. Somebody tried to make cruise control work on this part right here. This shift knob, by the way, makes this 350Z like CD09 transmission shift really nicely. Normally these have way too short of a throw. E-brake's completely useless, so we're gonna pull all this out and put like an ASD style pull up right there, hopefully. There's the steering wheel and then stock seats so that you can swap out with the driver and be pretty comfortable on drift week, so they can help get a bunch of your street miles out of the way, because these seats get really uncomfortable after a while. These have a throttle cut on throttle when you touch the foot brake. We're gonna have to sort that out. You think, there it is. And then this engine has all the timing stuff fixed on it. All that's super clean. Has a stock radiator, stock cooling, has aftermarket air filters. And that's pretty much it in the engine bay. That's what you want in a drift car on drift week, is a completely stock engine bay if possible. All right, close that baby up. And these are 18 by 10.5s up front. They do rub a little bit, and it's a 275 up front. So we're probably gonna go down to a 9.5 front wheel with a 245 on it. And then we're just gonna leave the angle kit as it is. I absolutely adore how this thing drives right now. And then the third car is kind of an in between that car. It's not as nice as that car, but it's not as rough as that car. It is off at paint right now. I might have a picture of it. And that makes the fourth car, but we are only renting 3 of them. And I just really want these guys to have a great experience where they fly into the DFW airport, they Uber over to the shop here, they pick the cars up, they drive them 2.5 hours to the first track, and then they can do all of drift week, and then they'll basically drive the cars 4.5 hours back here, drop them off, and fly back out, which really simplifies the entire trip by so much. Because if you can imagine, let's do like a thought game here. You find a car on Facebook Marketplace and you're a foreigner. You have to find a local to go look at it for you, or you have to buy it sight unseen, which is super dangerous with a drift car. Then you have to somehow get the money to the person, not have him steal it, register the car in your name here, insure it here. That's gonna take days of your time to go get it inspected and do everything and be here in the United States, which is gonna cost you, in a foreign country, I don't think you can really live easily for less than $300 a day or something like that. Nor would you want to, unless there's just somebody's couch to like crash on and stuff. But you'll probably need a hotel room. You'll probably need to do food and like little expenses like, I don't know, shampoo or something, whatever people with hair do. And then after they sort that stuff out, they'll need a place to work on the car and prep the car, time to get parts in. If there's any type of specialty parts, they'll have to either plan them out in advance, which is really difficult if you need to like sort the car out, which means go drift it in advance. So on day 1 of drift week, the car's good. So realistically, I mean, it's, unless you buy a drift car from a buddy or you borrow one or something like that, it's really difficult as a foreigner. And we do have a bunch of foreigners that do it, but man, it's expensive and it's difficult. And when you're done with the trip, you have to find some place to store it. So oftentimes renting is just a much cheaper option for everybody. Now, by the way, a few notes, because this is gonna be a pretty short episode, is me renting the cars. It's one, way more expensive than I thought I was gonna have to rent them for, because I'm registering them, I'm insuring them, so I'm paying sales taxes. I have to go test them, I have to buy them, locate them, bring them back. I have a full-time mechanic basically working on these things right now. I have, what else do I have? The testing, I'm required, you know, at least a set of tires on each car, which, you know, is an extra $300 to do that. Fuel, we had to transport the things back and forth from testing from Houston to Fort Worth, which meant about 600 miles of street driving on each one to do that. That also required Mark flying in to go like pick them up back up from Houston, because we had 4 cars at the event in Houston. to go like drive 350Zs and then also my V8 car, and getting them all down there was a huge disaster. And then repairing them and dealing with all of just the whole thing, it's not as profitable as you'd seem, and it's not a good idea to rent these cars. But I wanted to do it, and Drift Week 7 is coming up so quickly after Drift Week 6 that it might work out where I actually make some money off the rental cars, which would be cool. And I can also, if it's a turnkey thing, I can get more international drivers way easier. And I really want international people to experience this, because just like me going to Japan, it's incredibly difficult to go to another country and drift. Typically when you do, you're only gonna do like 1 track or something like that, maybe 2. But to get to do 6 tracks in 9 days of driving, like in Drift Week 6, that's mental. You're saving so much time and knocking so many tracks off your bucket list. Kind of like Wout coming from Amsterdam. It would have taken him a lifetime to do 20 something tracks or whatever he's done with us on the Drift Weeks he's been with us on. That's crazy. Absolutely mental that he's gonna do that. Because I have not driven that many tracks in 20 years overseas, and I've tried. When I went to Canada, I did 1 track. When I went to Australia, I did 1 track. When I would go to Japan for Mahon, I would do 1 track in 2 weeks of driving, like getting around and stuff. When I'd go for Ebisu, I would just drive Ebisu circuit with all their little tracks. But I've really only driven Ebisu and Mahon in my 10 years of driving in Japan, with my cumulative like 70 days on track kind of thing, which is bonkers if you think about it. I just keep going to the same place because it's the only place that makes sense to go to. Because if I go to Nico Circuit, I'll go hang out and stuff, but for me to get my car out of Ebisu over to Nico Circuit and back is going to require a bunch of money, a bunch of like favors from people, and then also it's going to require at least 3 to 4 days off of Ebisu Circuit to get 1 day of Nico. And if I was to take my JZX over to Mahon, it would take at least 7 days away from Ebisu Circuit, so I could go drive 1 to 2 days of Mahon. So you can see that it gets really weird. But with the Drift Week stuff, because the logistics are so sorted out for all the drivers, they just show up and drive. So it's insanely cheap to drive Drift Week, as opposed to going to do Ebisu or a lot of these other trips if you're trying to stack as many tracks as you can. It's kind of cheater right now. So yeah, that's why we're doing a rental fleet. We have these cars. I'll probably have them available for Drift Week 7. I might have 1 extra available for Drift Week 6. You can hit me up, but right now 3 of them are rented out. And the amount of time, by the way, it's gonna take Mark an entire month to prep these things so that the windows all work properly, so you don't have a ton of wind noise, to make sure the diffs work, all the fluids are changed, clutch and flywheel packages. Because even if the clutch feels good in the car, we have to take the transmission off to check, because we don't want somebody on day 5 having to do a clutch and flywheel out on the road. It is way easier just to make sure of all that here. Same with anything that's chattering or making noise, or if the AC systems need to be charged, or if wheel bearings need to be changed, or if control arms have play in them, or anything we can think of. It's easier just to fix it now and spend the money than have to deal with it on the road. Okay, so anyways, that's my rental fleet car of Z's, and you saw 2 of them, I guess, but I'll show you the rest at some point. And I'd really like to have all of them together in one scene, like lined up. That'd be super cool. P.S. guys, this is just something you might not realize. Since this is kind of like a business and I hired Mark to do this stuff, he had to go spend, how many days are you gonna have in just fixing the doors and windows on this thing? At least 1 to 2?
Oh, yeah, I'd say 2, because I had to go find windows and get doors and everything.
So just because the windows and stuff didn't line up on this rental car, he had to go buy 2 doors. He had to take this all apart. This was the old one. Because it wasn't lining up correctly, he replaced this entire thing, took it out. This stuff doesn't take a ton of time, but by the time you go look for the doors, get the doors, pick up the doors, bring them back, disassemble them, diagnose the problem on the door and figure out that you can't realign it properly, diagnose all the different things wrong with it, including, he just told me he had to change out this and everything. Look at how wiggly all this is.
Yeah, there's plastic that goes around it, but this whole thing was messed up. It was like all the way in the door frame.
Figure all this stuff out and put it back together. That's like 2 days just on that. And then he had probably 2 days fixing all the clutch problems and stuff, because he's also fitting the body on my Circle Track car right now. But this car alone is probably gonna take, what, 6 days total by the time you're done?
Oh yeah, because I'm still not done. I have bushings to put in that aren't here yet.
Yeah. Anyways, 6 days on one car. That means if we have 3 cars, you know, that's at least 3 weeks of a mechanic that has to have a livable wage where he can eat and sleep and do all the things he needs to, stacked into these cars. That's the really difficult part, is that you're not just like doing a homie hookup thing, because someone has to eat. So it's 3 weeks of his labor buried into these things, and just stacking more cars, like it's not even possible probably. Especially when we have to go also test the cars and stuff. So it just keeps getting more and more expensive. But it's cheaper for us to do it than it is for an international person, because we already live in Texas and it's very easy for me to just go check on cars and find deals and do everything else. And the biggest plus is walking away from the deals. I've looked at a bunch of 350Zs and the owners didn't even realize that they were hit badly and there was a bunch of problems with the cars. And like, I test drove one last night. It couldn't even go over 35 miles an hour. The steering rack was so messed up or something. It was just flopping around, and the owner was like, oh, it's never done that before. And you're like, oh man. So if he would have just told an international person that the car was completely ready to go, where that could have been thousands of dollars, fixing all that, adding a, like, you know, completely replacing the rack, adding an angle kit and getting that car ready, it would have been a lot of extra time and effort. Especially because all these old cars are going to be a little bit more difficult to get racks and stuff nowadays, or even just during COVID getting stuff rebuilt, because you can drop it off somewhere, it can take forever. So anyways, that's all. I just wanted to show you guys the behind the scenes as we get ready for Drift Week 6.